you. I want to begin by applauding Karen for the subject of this conference. It's the most important subject that we could discuss, and yet it's been absent from conservative discussions for 30 or 40 or 50 years. The term, the long march through the institutions, was a strategy for the left coined in 1968 by Rudi Dutschke, one of the malevolent juvenile delinquents of the era. It was a homage to the Chinese communists' famous long march by which they, from a small group, conquered China and turned it into a communist state, and to its leader, Mao Zedong, the greatest mass murderer in human history, who slaughtered 70 million people in peace to carry out his own Green New Deal. The most important thing, and which I'll be speaking about, is the ostrich-like response of conservatives, not just Republicans, but the whole conservative movement to these developments. Conservatives are still blind. Every day, I can read 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 websites where our opponents on the left are referred to as liberals. They're vindictive, relentless, ruthless bigots. The only liberals left in America, aside from Alan Dershowitz and Joe Lieberman, are conservatives. The Communist Party, this long march is the story of how a hounded and isolated communist remnant, as of the 1940s and early 1950s, has transformed was able to transform over the next 50, 60 years, American culture, so that our universities, our media, and the Democratic Party are all cultural Marxists, racists, and totalitarians. That's their instinct. These are people who march to a party line. I mean, I can't detect much difference between the politics of Schumer and Pelosi, and especially these really repulsive people like Blumenthal and Swalwell, from my parents' communism. They're communists, is what they are. That's how did this happen? And their chief weapon of these liberals is character assassination. You pop your head up, you're going to have a 30-year career at the top of America's political structures like Barr, and suddenly become demonized by these by these communists. The first institution, the left was pretty influential in the Roosevelt administration, thanks in large part to Eleanor. But when the Cold War started and the nuclear age dawned, people got properly scared, and the communists became isolated and effectively quarantined. This period is known, because the left writes our history, as the Red Scare. It was very healthy. We should be scared of people who identify with an enemy power like the one run by Joseph Stalin. I grew up in this community where everybody wanted Stalin to win the Cold War. And so in this period, although they all wanted to create a Soviet America, they didn't say that. They claimed to be Jeffersonian Democrats. One thing you need to know about the left is they're always lying, always. The communist left revived itself, the next generation revived itself in what's known as the New Left. But this is really a fiction. There was no New Left. By the mid-60s, the New Left was calling themselves anti-communists. This came after the Khrushchev report. Who were these people? They were all the children of Stalinists. Every leader, with one exception, and he was schooled by Michael Tiger, who was a member of the party, with Tom Hayden. But every other leader of the so-called New Left of SDS was a child of a Stalinist. And their mission was to rescue communism from the stain that had enveloped it on the left after Khrushchev gave his secret report about the crimes of Stalin. Anti-communist. Well, what that means is, yeah, we know that Stalin did some bad things, but you guys are much worse, and we're going to destroy you. And by the way, the subtitle of my new book is The War to Destroy Christian America, a country which is based on, actually, it's a product of the Protestant Reformation, but not to go into that right now. In 1968, Tom Hayden organized, really, a riot. This is where it all began, at the first institution that they sought to take over make the long march through was the Democratic Party. The riot he created the purpose of it was to destroy the electoral chances of Hubert Humphrey and knock out the anti-communist liberals in the Democratic Party. And it was successful. Humphrey lost the election, and then Hayden, I was actually shocked. I was more of a true believer. The Democrats had always been our enemy. I was dumbfounded when Hayden and Fonda led the left into the Democratic Party. They formed these racist caucuses, the Black Caucus, the Chicano Caucus, and the Progressive Caucus, and they were used as platforms to take control of the Democratic Party, which they did over the next 50 years, culminating. It started with the McGovern campaign, whose slogan was, "America, come home." In other words, we're the bad guys in the world. This is the mentality that you have to understand how treasonous these people are. And it culminated in the election of a communist, Barack Obama, to the White House. Barack Obama had the same upbringing as I did. He was raised by communists. His entire political career until he made it to the national stage was funded and organized by communists, by the communist New Left. He was surrounded. Valerie Jarrett is chief. I mean, I'm sure all of you have read this stuff, so I don't really have to go over. You all know who Franklin Marshall is and so forth. And what's Barack Obama's great achievement, aside from pulling our troops out of Iraq, allowing ISIS to develop and slaughter 200,000 Christians and Yazidis? It was the Iran deal. And this gets me. Every Republican refers to the Iran deal as a bad deal. It was an evil deal. It was a treasonous deal. So, anyway, that's where we are today. We have a Democratic Party who operates according to the principles of cultural Marxism. And how did this happen? Well, the second institution the left marched through were the universities. They did this behind the theories of Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Stalinist, who, like many of us on the left, understood finally that the working class was never going to perform the way Marx was going to be a revolutionary agent. He came up with this idea that we have to control the cultural means of production, the universities, the churches, the museums, the media, and just affect what's in people's minds. And wipe out their understanding of our history, of our freedoms, of where they came from, and program people to be communists. And it was easy. The left, first of all, these leftists were in the university because they didn't want to fight the anti-communist war in Vietnam. The first thing they did was get control of hiring committees. I explain this in my book, The Professors, how they did it. I've written 5 books about the universities. I mean, they were read. That was, sold a lot of copies, but it didn't have much impact on the Republican Party or the conservative institutions like the Heritage Foundation. Even though they were all very kind to me, they didn't act to stop or to, our guys, like Bill Kristol, were trustees of universities. They did nothing to stop what went on. They got control of the hiring committees. They hired only leftists. They, in effect, purged conservatives from the faculties. So conservatives are as rare as unicorns and have been for 30 or 40 years. They changed the curriculum, so you had indoctrination courses in leftist ideology, like so-called women's studies. You can't get a degree in women's studies, let alone be hired on the faculty, unless you accept the idea that biology is not really significant in creating men and women. They're socially engineered, or as they like to say, socially constructed. This is nonsense, utter intellectual garbage, which any neuroscientist, I mean, there's so much evidence for the hard wiring of the differences between men and women, as though you couldn't discover that for yourself from the time you're 5 or 6 years old. Okay, I not only wrote books, I started a campaign behind what I thought was the only practical remedy, an academic Bill of Rights, which drew on all the academic freedom professions of these academies, all the classic documents, and all it said was that students have a right to a professional education, not to an indoctrination, so that they have to get books on both sides of controversial issues. They have to be presented in a fair-minded way. The one-party classroom book that Larry held up was where I showed that, the reading lists are like 98, 99% leftists, and then they'll have maybe a reading from Edmund Burke, who actually was a liberal. That only dead conservatives are acceptable. I got individual conservatives, there are out there, and Republicans who stood up for this. I even got John Boehner to put it in the Higher Education Authorization Bill, but he did it just because he was in a fight with the Democrats and he thought it would drive them a little nuts, which it did. But I was approached by a former Army Ranger who had been in the Battle of Mogadishu in Pennsylvania, who was an assemblyman, a freshman assemblyman. He wanted to pass the Academic Bill of Rights in Pennsylvania. The Republican Party didn't have the gumption to do that, but we did get them to authorize a committee to look into the state of academic freedom in Pennsylvania for students. I actually wrote the report for the committee. It was a one Republican majority committee, and in the 11th hour, for example, there are 17 universities in the state system in Pennsylvania, and the only mention of academic freedom with a grievance machinery is in the faculty and employee handbook. So there's no protections for students. One provost after another, university official came and lied to the committee and said students had all these protections and so forth. On the 11th hour, one of the Republicans defected to the other side. They tore up the entire, literally, this is the night before the vote to ratify the report, tore out the whole report, and put in like a one sentence that students in Pennsylvania are all protected for academic freedom. They all have academic freedom rights. Every Republican on the committee voted for that final report, which was one big lie, because they didn't want to be embarrassed to show that they had lost control of their committee. And I was hung out to dry. I'm just bringing this up to show you how this happened. It could not have happened if conservatives have had their eyes open and been willing to fight, which they still are. You know, we've got one great fighter in Trump, but aside from that. And the third institution is what I call the shadow political universe, 501c3s. Under the IRS rules, like this organization, mine, we're all charities, but we're not all charities. Charity is anybody, you help anybody, like a hospital. So it's really simple to solve this. I'll show you how bad the situation is. All you have to do is have the IRS define a charity as one that's accessible by all, and make another category for political ones. And I realized I was slitting my own throat. If it got passed, all funders would be really mad at me. I wouldn't have any resources, but it would be a huge gain for the country. Why? Well, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and these are entities which are self-perpetuating. They're accountable to nobody. But the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all by itself, has more assets, $33 billion, than all 75 at the time. Or I should have mentioned, I wrote a book about this called The New Leviathan. All 75 conservative foundations put together. And then when they fund the policy 501c3s, here's the imbalance. There are 533 left-wing environmental groups, global warming alarmists, to 35 conservative ones. But the assets are 249 to 1. There's $9.5 billion for the left groups and $38 million for the conservatives. On immigration, it's the same story. I could go on and on. The Ford Foundation has more discretionary money to spend than the federal government. When the federal government spends money, there's strings tied to it. And where are conservatives on this? I had two blurbs on this book, one from Peter Schweitzer and the other from Karl Rove. Here's what Rove said. And I don't do this, I've written so many books. It doesn't matter to me if no one reads one, well, it does matter because it was a lot of work. But anyway, a sharply worded, deeply informed expose of the powerful, very wealthy network of liberal foundations, Karl left. That's something that's spending hundreds of millions to reshape America's politics, culture, and economic structure. Read this and be afraid. Nobody read it. There wasn't one review, not one mention in all the conservative sites of this book. I wrote it for conservatives. It shows the Democratic Party is the party of the super wealthy, which anybody can see. Anyway, so that's the sad story of everything. I've just written this book about the war to destroy Christian America. The ideas which we cherish as Americans are Protestant ideas. Equality, inclusion, tolerance, pluralism. They all come out of the Protestant Reformation. Before the Reformation, you couldn't get to heaven except if you went through the Catholic Church and its priesthood. The Protestant reformers understood that churches, and of course there were state religions and states, are human institutions and therefore corrupt or subject to human corruptions. And they came up with this idea of the priesthood of all believers, that every child of God confronts God one-on-one. No intermediaries. Nobody can tell you what a Christian is because that's why you have so many Protestant sects. You can see right there, that is the germ of the American idea. And it's been under siege, and this is another aspect of the left's march through the institutions. They took the Supreme Court as an instrument by which they could subvert the majority. They could, being radicals who couldn't sell their wares to the American public, they could circumvent the public and just impose on them. And so they drove religion out of the schools. You can't teach kids that the Pilgrims were Christians fleeing religious persecution. The foundation of all our freedoms is religious liberty. It's under relentless assault. The worst offender was Obama, but it continues. Why is Chick-fil-A being banned in the airports? Because they make bad chicken? No, because their charitable arm supports 501c3s that promote their ideas. So how un-American is that? And the whole Democratic Party supports that. It's a communist party. And people you can say neo-communist if you're shy of saying communist. That's who they are. And the Supreme, think about it. What is the Supreme Court? It's 9 lawyers appointed for life by politicians. Now, how could that go wrong? Anyway, I've got 1 minute, and I'm going to give you the theology here. What separates left from right, and the Judeo-Christian, it's not just the Christian tradition, but the Judeo-Christian tradition tells you the problem, the root cause of all social problems is us. For the left, it's society. People are naturally good. No, they're not. But and society makes them bad. There is no such thing as society. It's just a reflection of who we are as a collectivity. But if you have this idea, then you say, well, if people are true to their nature, which is good, then they'll be politically correct. And if they're not, we're going to make them politically correct. That's how the communists killed 100 million people in the last 100 years, as they were not going to be true to their nature. But you see the arrogance that lies behind this. Remember the serpent in the garden? Eden was much better than the Green New Deal. You live forever. There's no pain and child. Well, the story. But the condition was you can't want to know evil. You can't eat from that tree. It's the most wonderful parable of who and where we are, whether you're a believer or not. Conservatism begins with the recognition that people are the problem. That's why they understand these people like how. Let me just do one thing from the Green New Deal. Okay, they put a gun to your head. The planet is over in 12 years. If in 10 you don't give us the power to do this, we're going to take away every gasoline-driven car in America. How many cars do you think there are like that? 250 million? 300 million? People they're going to have to sacrifice big financial sacrifices, especially to people in the middle class. An automobile is not a small purchase item. Then you're going to force people to give up something actually a lot of them, for some reason or other, actually love. They love their cars. And they, they love their cars, and they've already made the choice not to buy a Prius, which would be outlawed anyway. So you're going to have to go around the country to 200 million owners and rip their cars from them, cost them. How could you do that without creating a police state? And these people will they won't hesitate for a moment before creating a police state. They already have a university system that nobody on the left complains about that has shut down conservative. I haven't been able to visit a campus without bodyguards for 20 years. And I'm, believe me, not unique in that. You have a party who already has passed laws sanctioning the murder of children who've actually been born. This intoxication with the idea that they can manipulate people and impose on them this incredible solution called social justice dehumanizes them. They can look like very nice people. You can't be superior to the Bolsheviks. They weren't all monsters. You read Trotsky, he was a very brilliant author. I mean, you read the history of the Russian Revolution by Trotsky, it's a wonderful book. But he was a mass murderer. Sorry for that. I want to depress you. Thank you.